Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on customer service automation. It's 11 o'clock, and we're just going to wait a moment or two for other people to join, and then we'll be ready to start. Looking forward to an exciting series of topics today.
Morning, everyone.
Hi, Joe. Joe, what part of the world are you in?
So I am based out of Honolulu, Hawaii. I used to be based out of the San Francisco Bay Area, but I was lucky
Right.
enough to move here about 5 years ago. My wife is from here originally, and when we got married, we wanted to start a family, and we wanted to be closer to her family. And
Nice.
I made the difficult decision of moving from one of the most expensive places to live in the U.S. to
Even
another
more.
expensive, yeah, possibly more expensive place to live in the U.S.
That's great. Well, it takes a little getting used to the time zone difference, being
Yeah.
6 hours away from New York.
Yeah, I actually have someone on my team in the UK, so we're almost like literally on the opposite end
Sense of,
in different time spectrum. Yeah, but we make it work.
yeah. We have a member of our team in the Ukraine now, so it's always
Oh wow.
stressful. Always asking him how everything's going, but he's very stoic and always says things are going okay. So I'm glad to hear that. We're always checking on him.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we'll get started. Let me first introduce myself. I'm CEO of Y Meadows, and Y Meadows is a company that focuses on machine learning and automation in the customer support space. I'm going to be having an opportunity to tell you a little bit more about what we do in the real world and real customer applications. And Joe, why don't you introduce yourself and say a little bit what you do at OpenTable?
Sure. So I am the senior revenue operations manager at OpenTable. Previously, before that, I was the support operations manager at OpenTable. What my team does is we oversee process improvement, change management, and systems and tools for our teams. And most recently, in my new role, I'll be doing the same with our sales organization as well. I've been at OpenTable for 17 years now, a little over 17 years. I started off as a customer support rep and worked my way into various different operational analyst and leadership roles.
Good.
So, yeah.
Well, that's a fantastic background. It gives you perspective, not only from the management, but from what it's like to be actually answering the messages from customers and interacting with them. So I think it'll be a nice perspective to have today.
Yeah, sounds good.
Just a little bit of the rules for those who are joining. We have everybody muted right now, so if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll be sort of running our conversation to just about 11:30, and then we'll take the next 15 minutes or so to answer some of the questions that came through the chat. So look forward to be able to address your particular items. And we're recording this session, and we'll be able to make the recording available to some of you afterwards. So these are some of the key topics that we wanted to cover today. I think it's a real opportunity to discuss the philosophy around automation, the tech stack, get Joe's experience in having dealt with so many technologies over these different years as to what have been the ones that are really working and providing value for the company. So look forward to discussing all of those different points in our conversation. I thought maybe I'd start off just a little bit on the topic of why automation is important. In some of our earlier webinars, we've talked about employee morale, employee retention. This is a real switch of topics for us. And I'll start with the CEO perspective, not only from Y Meadows, but having run other software companies before in my career. We always found that one of the core challenges is how do you scale the company without scaling support even more. So you have this ever growing customer base, and the customer base all needs support. And then you have the new customers that are coming in, and hopefully they're coming in at a either steady or growing rate. So between the two of those, if you're constantly needing to answer more and more support questions into the base, and if you have a engineering team that's producing lots of new things, that also produces new challenges. So you find yourself in this position where the support department is just endlessly requiring more resources. So to me, that was the solution to that. At least one of the possible solutions to that has always been around automation. And Joe, I'd love to hear your perspective on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, really in following line with what you were saying, sometimes it's not that, you need to grow your team at a slow rate. Sometimes it's your leadership team determines that, your budgets are tight and you have to figure out ways to do more with less, or ways to do more with the exact same. So even as your business grows, your headcount's going to stay the same. And so there's really only two ways that you can, continue to support your customer. One is maybe you outsource and you find a more cost-effective solution there, or the other is you start thinking about automation. From our side of things, we are a fully in-house support team. We believe that service is of the utmost importance to our customers. Therefore, we chose the route of automation. Now, you mentioned, I think you had some earlier talks about employee morale and retention, and how maybe this is a bit of a different conversation. I would say there is some overlap here in that, when we talk about automation, and we'll get to it later, a lot of the work you're talking about is more of the repetitive tasks that maybe some of the agents on your teams might find to be mundane and kind of boring. And when you can automate that, and then you now have this chunk of time freed up, you can devote them to do more work that's, one, probably going to be more value driven for your customers, or value added for your customers, but also more rewarding for them, right? Any employee that you want to retain is always going to want to grow and do more. And this really, automating your more repetitive tasks allows you to do that. So
great. That makes a lot of sense. So I think what we'll do is we'll stop the slides for a few minutes and just have a conversation a little bit about your tech stack and what you've done at OpenTable. I think everybody's really interested. I know you have a big volume of messages coming in from both consumers, the diners in your case, and as well as the restaurants. And so be real interested to hear what you've selected as a tool set you're using.
Yeah, sure. And just to give you some background on our team, we do both restaurant support as well as diner support. So we're both B2B and B2C. We have about 200 folks on our support team today across North America, EMEA, and APAC. So not a huge team, but a rather large team. Our tech stack, we do use a lot of different tools, both internally and customer facing. Our customer facing tools that we use today, Salesforce is our CRM. We also use it for email and chat support. We also use Salesforce for both our internal and customer facing knowledge repository. We use TalkDesk as our telephony tool. We use Solvi for our knowledge list. So basically it sits on top of our knowledge site and helps customers find answers to their questions. And then we use Y Meadows for a lot of our task automation as it relates to currently today, more so our diner support.
Okay, fantastic. It's have you had Salesforce in place for quite a while already?
Oh yeah, we've had Salesforce in place for over 10 years now.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit of how you organize your team and sort of how the support department is structured.
Yeah, I've been a part of the support organization for a long time. In the past, we had things broken down by region, and we really tried to globalize that, both customer experience, but also our agent experience, so that whatever rules and policies and processes that we have in place within our North American team also are the same for our EMEA and APAC teams, as much as possible as laws will allow. But we find that operationally that helps us execute a lot better and a lot faster because everyone's sort of on the same page and understands what all the other teams are doing. Right.
Okay, great. How does management sort of view these automation projects when you're ready to start something? You know, Y Meadows was a big undertaking. Do you get support from management? Is it a big sales effort?
Yeah, I think from our perspective or from our management perspective, they see the value as much as I do, right? They understand it's about freeing up time and then spending the time to give more values back to our customers. So it's not just about answering their questions, it's about how do we get them more engaged with the system that they're using in the case of our restaurants, right? So in this case, we focus all of our automation on our diner support, but we can take that time back and reinvest it into our restaurants and really get them better understanding how to use our system. And so to them, it's a no-brainer. So that part was easy. I would say, we'll get into it more in best practices. It's really the cross-functional aspect of it that you really have to sell to get other teams involved, because you need to rely on those other teams to do work for you as part of automation.
Interesting. Well, I'll look forward to hear a few more thoughts on that in a minute. How do you pick which automation projects you're going to focus on? What's in sort of the range of possible solutions that are out there? How do you prioritize and pick?
It really starts with data. You have to understand all of the different types of contacts you're supporting, and then start looking at what are your higher volume drivers, and also maybe low volume drivers, but things that are taking up the most time, right? Sort of looking at both of those things, and then start looking at of these requests, of these questions, which are repeatable requests that you could train someone to do fairly in a fairly straightforward fashion, right? And once you sort of have an idea of both what's driving your volume and what's sort of repeatable volume, then you kind of have an idea of what will move the needle, because those are the things that automation is great for. I tell my, the joke I like to tell my team is, AI is kind of, to me, really stupid because it can't do anything unless you train it. But once you train it to do that one thing, it'll do that one thing forever, and it won't have a bad day. It won't forget. It won't call out sick. It'll just keep on doing that thing. And so, that's really where you start seeing the value.
Okay, great. Tell us a little bit about what it takes to do a successful automation project. How do you sort of staff it, manage it? So many people try and get frustrated. Tell us a little bit about your management techniques there.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely took us a long time, and that you do have to build momentum and support for it from your cross-functional teams. For at least in our case, automation involved us having access to some of our internal systems, and not just access to that data, but access to APIs that allowed us to pull data and manipulate data. And so that affects buy-in from our engineering teams, making sure they're okay with, or they're understanding the value of what we're doing, but also our security teams, right? Security is really important for us here, and it's getting their buy-in to allow an outside vendor such as yourself to come in and have access to that data, and in order to improve business process for our customers and for our agents. And so you really have to, partially, I would say what helps is you have to sell them on the premise of what I just said before is, it sounds a bit risky, but if you can build those safeguards in place to make sure, this automations aren't going awry, you're going to see less errors overall in terms of the work that's being handled. Because again, it's going to be repetitive and consistently handled every single time. If you want someone to put a note into one field, and you're training an agent on that, and sometimes they forget, the system will always know that's the one field they go because they've been trained to. They don't know to do anything else.
Right. How about staffing the team? One of the things that really impressed me with the whole process of working with OpenTable is kind of the way and the talent you had on the project.
Yeah, and so it is really important to have the right project team. And it's not about hiring new people. It's just about making sure you have people on your team with these skill sets, right? One, I think the most important one for us was you have to have a strong business analyst, someone who can really document your processes. If you're trying to automate something, really document it, all the way through down to even the smallest detail. Every single decision where a support agent might need to make to resolve this request, you have to document that because that has to get factored into how you're building your automation. So someone who can, one, not just document it, but really think through, are there better ways to do this once you can automate it? We have someone like that on our team. I just want to give her a shout out. Her name is Alex Dana. She's done amazing work for us in terms of launching a lot of our automations. Additionally, you need to pull in probably your more senior agents who can walk you through what the process is today. And most organizations have their processes documented or their statements of procedure, but there are always those small details that don't get captured within the written document of like, oh, hey, here's like this one piece of knowledge that I just learned over time that we train everyone on, but we don't actually document. Those are the things you really have to capture in the automation if you want to do it right. I would also say, someone on your team who can really think about the customer experience as it relates to automation, because when you're trying to help automate these tasks, you always want to make sure that the customer is not going to be affected negatively in any way by what you're doing. And a lot of times, I would say you also need to focus on your communication, right? So as part of Meadows fulfilling requests, we have you send an email letting the customer know their request has been fulfilled. I would say there's a right way and a wrong way to message that action, right? Meaning, in our case, what we did is we really thought about, should we let them know that maybe this process was done via automation versus a human? Because there are chances where we mistakenly did something that we shouldn't have. It's better to let them know, like, hey, part of the reason why this happened was because it was a system doing this and it wasn't someone not reading your email correctly. Because I think that really is important for the customer to understand. So someone who can think like that. And again, this doesn't all have to be different people, but more so, those are the types of skills you need. Another is someone who really can understand how your CRM system or your ticketing system has to tie into your backend systems as well as Meadows. Someone who can really think sort of more from a technical aspect. That'll also be important because that's where a lot of the plumbing needs to take place to launch successfully.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit more how you use Meadows. Which ways did you decide to take advantage of the technology? This was one of your first machine learning projects. How did you find that whole process to be?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, I said earlier with regards to, we really looked at all of our contacts, what was driving the most volume, what we thought was most repeatable. So we do a lot of automation around questions and requests about points, login issues, really the more administrative and repetitive tasks that we feel, these agents are essentially clicking buttons at this point, and there's not a lot of, let's say, high level or deep thought into what's happening here. Not a lot of root cause analysis work, if you will, right? And so I would say the results of that have been great. I was just looking at the data last week. We launched, I think, fully with some of our automations in May now, and we're saving about like 3 FTEs worth of time each month, which is huge, which has been really beneficial for us.
Right. And how have you found working with the Meadows team and sort of designing these flows and handling all those issues?
I think one of the things to be successful on projects is finding the right partners to do the work with. We've been around for a long time now. I've been with the company for a long time. We have a lot of what I'll call complex processes, right? Because we have tech debt, we have all of these things, and so you really need a partner with you that can really configure the system to work how your company works. I think a lot of times, you get a tool and you kind of have to bend your processes to fit that tool, and sometimes it's needed to improve process and workflows. But I would say for automation and for security and for just long-term success, it is important for your partner to really meet you on where your processes are and where your tech stack is. And so, you guys have been great with that. Every new rule or new change that we have to put in, whether it's because we want to, or our security team or our fraud team wants to, you're able, your system is flexible enough to do so. And I think that's the most important thing, right? Part of the challenge with what we were doing is a lot of our API data that comes through, there's a lot of text to parse through, and you need a good amount of intelligence on the system side to be able to parse through that data and find what you're looking for. And so, I actually don't know how you guys coded it, but you guys did it in a way that that was reliable and that was very consistent. So very appreciative of that.
Good. Just a little bit more on the security part. I know that it's a common element that comes up in enterprise companies is that they're concerned about security. Tell us a little bit about how you go about that whole process of establishing, making everybody comfortable.
I think it's you have to include them in every part of the conversation. I would say, in my time here, security teams tend to slow things down. Like that's just reality, right? Because I'm on the business side. I want to move fast. I want to solve problems. But the more that you can include them into all of your conversations, the more that they're going to have buy-in, as they've been consulted, right? Even if it doesn't pertain to them, they know that you're not hiding anything from them. That builds that level of trust for them to, maybe to compromise on certain things that they initially thought was maybe not secure. One of the things that we did as part of this project is, we with your help is, as we're running through automations, we're keeping track of how quickly these automations are running within a time frame. Like, let's say in a given minute, because that really helps our security team understand, okay, well, is anyone are there bots trying to hack the system or trying to commit some type of fraud? In which case, we can tell by the volume of how quickly automations are running if that's happening. So if someone's like trying to run through a list of email addresses and try to find, OpenTable accounts, let's say, if they're doing that very quickly, we'll be able to tell. So it's really about making sure you're building in these safety checks and these triggers to catch that. I would also say, a couple of best practices I didn't mention. This isn't necessarily on the security side, but I just wanted to call attention to. Sort of also speaking about triggers. As you're running through automation, you're always going to have scenarios where the automation can't run for some reason. Maybe some field wasn't statused properly, or it's coming across a field where the value was unknown that you find. You want to both capture it and report on it within your CRM system and have fairly clearly defined reasons. So when you go back and you start looking at, okay, so last month, out of all the automations we ran, which ones weren't successful, you can quickly see what the reasons were. You don't have to spend a ton of time digging into it. And then from there, you can start to then hypothesize, okay, well, what might be causing this issue, right? Sure. And then figuring out ways to maybe change your business rules to be more flexible to be able to automate them.
There's always edge cases, and like sort of tracking all these edge cases, you can never think of them all up front. Yeah, it's a good point.
There are always edge cases. And then finally, I would say you want to dial in your intent matching correctly, right? So the automation is sort of, in my view, the last part of it. The first part is really understanding what the customer wants and getting that correct. Because the more you can get that accurate, the less issues you'll have downstream, right? And so it's as a team, when you're finding examples of, let's say, account issues, being able to find a really diverse example of different types of requests. So so then the machine learning can better understand, someone might talk about login issues in 10 different ways, and it's all capturing that up front. So I would say once you launch, you really have to dial in and then start making sure, like, okay, are the types of questions the customers are asking, are they still matching what the system is thinking that they're going to do? Or is the system maybe missing things because someone now has some new terminology that we haven't yet captured, and then integrating that into your intent model.
Well, that's really part of the, not everybody in the attending might understand the intent model. So let me explain what that is just real briefly, is that as messages are coming in, the machine learning model needs to understand the topic of that message. And in machine learning language, we call that the intent. And part of what our belief is at White Meadows is that doing that really accurately means that you have to be an expert in customer support messages, because they're just different. They're different than legal documents. They're different than, pharma documents or academic documents. So sort of building and understanding machine learning just for customer support is a special area. And I imagine, Joe, this has been one of the first machine learning projects that you've been involved in. What's been in your experience with, the training and then ultimately the accuracy?
Yeah, I can't stress enough. You have to spend a lot of time to get this right, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is literally, finding, let's say, 50 examples of what you want to train on and making sure like this is that what the customer is saying is correct. I think when we initially did it, we had a tendency of saying, hey, we'll just pull, a specific case category and randomly select 50 of them and then just send them through. But as we know, as I know as a support agent, I didn't always categorize things correctly. And so if your data is not clean from the beginning, then your results are not going to be clean at the end. So it's really important to spend the time necessary
Right.
to get your intent matching right.
Although one of the breakthroughs of machine learning is that you only need 50 or 100. You don't need
Right.
10,000 examples anymore. And I think that's a fantastic change in the technology over the last couple of years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit more about how you um, involve your team in these projects. So, I think some companies are worried that, well, people are just going to be scared that they're going to be replaced, or how do you make this a positive experience for your team, and or was it a positive experience?
Yeah, I think that there's always the moment that you talk about automation, regardless of what you say afterwards, all they're going to hear is we're going to lose our job. So it's really important to back that up with actions, showing that if certain cases have gone away, that you're actively finding your agents more challenging work to do, right? Really focus about their career growth and what else they could be taking on, right? Versus just reporting on the positive things they're seeing from automation.
Yeah. And did you find
Yeah.
that to be a successful technique?
Yeah, I mean, I fortunately don't have to manage the people side. I'm more on the system side. But
Yeah.
our people operations team is phenomenal, and yes, they personal development, career development has always been a priority with them, and so from that standpoint, they've been able to have those conversations and assuage any fears that agents might have.
One of the things that I quote you on, Joe, sometimes is that you said to me in the past, if I can write out a document that says exactly how the agent's supposed to solve the ticket, then Y Meadows should be able to do it. We should be able to train the machine learning to be able to do it. Is that a philosophy? Do you sort of, as you think about which Y Meadows project you should take, that's the way you look at it?
Yeah, I do. And even if you have to write it out and there are multiple sort of edge cases, as long as you kind of know what those are, you can always just bucket them as in like, well, we can't make this decision. We're going to hand it off to an agent to make that decision. And that's what we've done. So it's never the goal of like automating 100%. It's just automating the largest portion where you know that you can. But as long as you have it documented, then you can train the system to do whatever it is that you need it to do, right? So we do have a portion of our contacts that fall into a specific category. If it's one of these, let's say 5 edge cases, then it just goes to an agent because that's where the more value added human support comes in.
And good. Let's just go back to our slides for a minute and kind of summarize some of the main points that we've had today. So here's kind of a takeaway, I think, of at least some of the topics that we've covered. Joe, if you have any, maybe you just want to repeat a couple of the key thoughts there.
Yeah, sure. Obviously picking the right initiatives, the ones that will move the needle the most, ones that are repeatable. I would say more important than all of this is getting buy-in from all involved departments, because your project cannot be successful unless you have all of your other teams helping and them buying into that. And then, staffing your project team accordingly with the right skill sets. And then, this last point we didn't really talk about, but yes, machine learning and robotic process automation is here to stay. As part of my new role now within sales operations, I'm really now looking at areas where automation can help with internal support, right? We have salespeople with a lot of questions, and again, those are things that we can write out what the right response to certain questions are, or certain scenarios, and again, you can automate. So
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
For some of our customers, we're not only dealing with customer support, but we're supporting sales teams and other HR teams, other kind of internal operations.
Yeah. In my opinion, it's all customer support, right? Your customers they just look different, but their needs are the same.
Good. So thanks. Let's just see if we have any questions that came up on the chat that we want to respond to. So hold on 1 minute, and we'll. So one of the questions that came up are, what are possible ways of ensuring that automation of tasks doesn't negatively affect the customer?
Yeah, I spoke to it a bit earlier about just sort of messaging them appropriately so they understand, that maybe it was a system handling their request versus human. Just so I think expectations are different, at least from my opinion, right? My opinion is that if something was automated, there might be room for mistakes because the system just didn't understand what I said. Whereas I expect a human to be more, let's say, present and to be more focused on what my needs are, read through my request and fulfill it to those expectations. I think that's one. I would say the other is also looking to see if you have certain customers who might have gone through the same type of automation flow multiple times. Maybe there's something wrong there. Maybe the system is, system didn't understand the request, but they don't have, for whatever reason, they're just stuck in this loop of just talking to the system. So identifying those customers, figuring out ways to reach out to them, right? There's data that you can pull. We do customer satisfaction surveys on both our human and our automated requests. So looking to see if there are certain customers with negative CSATs related to automated requests, and then making sure those are always looked into so that we can ensure that there doesn't need to be additional follow-up there.
We've had a couple of people ask if you could give some examples, if you're comfortable giving examples of the types of automatable flows that you've worked on, and how, particularly with Y Meadows.
Sure. We have customers that sometimes their accounts get deactivated due to certain behaviors that we don't want them to do, primarily around no-shows. Because within the restaurant industries, no-shows really hurts a restaurant's business, and so we really try to encourage our diners to cancel their reservations whenever possible, or or contact the restaurant, right? So for accounts that are deactivated, they'll write in and they'll tell us that we can check whether or not their account has been deactivated. We can check when it was deactivated, and so there are fields built into our system where if a certain status matches deactivation, then we know that they've been deactivated. We can check other fields to see if they've been deactivated for other reasons, maybe due to fraud or some bad behavior. As long as those other fields aren't flagged, then we feel pretty good about reactivating that account, because that's what we train our agents to do.
Right. What would be you have another example, perhaps, just one or two more?
Sure. Another example is sometimes a diner might not have received points on a reservation, for example, for whatever reason, and so we can look to see their reservation history to see, like, okay, did they attend this reservation? Were they given points? And if not, then we can fulfill those requests. But again, I would say anything that involves, I think, giving customers points or something, we're very careful about. We build a lot of rules to be more conservative, so that if anything, the edge cases are larger than the normal cases, because we definitely want to make sure we're not just giving points away, at will.
Sure.
there.
Points are made.
Yeah, but any type of like those requests, I would say, even requests where you're just answering or just providing a response for something. So it might not be a request, but it's just a certain type of question that constantly gets answered. And for whatever reason, maybe your knowledge, site is just it's not adept at matching that question to the right answer. That's also something that can be automated as well, right? I would also say, things that we've done where, in the instances where we could not completely automate a task, we can still gather data ahead of time to then allow our agents to fulfill that request. Because I think with email as a support channel, there is often a lot of back and forth because the customer isn't going to provide all of the information necessary up front, right? And then so what you can do is then you can use Meadows to collect all of that information and then create a case out of it. And then you're only needing your agent's time to actually perform the task versus the back and forth of trying to ask all of the data gathering questions.
That's great. And not only that, but it will reduce the total time to resolution, which I think
Exactly.
makes the customer happier as well in the whole process.
Yeah. I hope for the people who asked that question that those were examples that made sense. If not, please chime in.
Yeah, sure. What I see some questions that maybe that I can just respond to about. You mentioned your stack is Salesforce, but other people have Zendesk or HubSpot or Help Scout or lots of different systems out there. So I just wanted to let people know that Meadows isn't tied to a particular set of technologies. We've built integrations to a wide library of different systems, not only on the ticketing side or the case management side, but also on the ability to integrate with all kinds of different systems internally. So as Joe's been talking about, they have their own internal unique APIs that are just for OpenTable. And we find that at many of our customers, they have their own unique backend systems that require integration work. And that's part of the magic sauce, I would say. One of the questions that came up now is, how do you respond to sudden increases in ticket volumes? And I think it's a really good question for you because you're in a very seasonal business. You have Valentine's Day and Mother's Day and things like that. So maybe you can talk how Meadows has helped in that area also.
Yeah. That's actually that actually did bring up something I totally forgot about. So there, I think this was a year ago now. When we were just starting our relationship with you guys, we made some changes to our diner points policy, and it caused like this huge influx of emails, right? And like we're talking huge, like probably like I don't know, 5x our volume every single day for probably like a couple months. And so obviously when your backlog grows to that point, especially with emails, you start getting the repeat emails because your customers didn't get their answer, and now they're waiting weeks to get a response. And we needed to quickly triage and understand what are our general support questions versus what are questions around these issues. And so this was like very spur of the moment kind of just like a project on our end where we're like, hey, we're going to give you a bunch of these examples of the types of questions we're getting specifically related to the changes in this policy. We just need to identify them and move them somewhere else, because those questions we can sort of answer on a delayed time frame versus helping people who are really having problems making reservations, accessing their account. And so we gave you the examples, and then we we quickly ported everything through so that you could see all of our contacts coming in, and then you were flagging the ones that were related to these policies, so we could quickly sort of triage and then separate them, and then deal with them later. So I think that is one of the really cool things about machine learning, is that once you have the examples, you can quickly identify the types of cases that are coming in before anyone even has to look at them, and then decide what you want to do afterwards.
Good. And then just in terms of your normal seasonality of the business and flows of volume changes, how's it helped there?
Yeah, I would definitely say, with our recent automations, that work is kind of, as people have now absorbed that policy change, there's less questions around that. But just with the current automations that we have in place today, that has really helped to, we haven't hit any, we released in May, so we really haven't hit any major seasonal volumes yet. So we'll see coming up in the holidays, November, December for us. But yeah,
Big
but we're
time, right?
definitely, yeah,
Right. Yeah. Good. One of the questions that came up were a little bit, how do you find this set of technologies different than general automation tools? Sort of plain old robots doing things. And so one of the areas that we feel is being specialized in customer support has made this so much easier to build the machine learning models around it and building, the automations that just understand customer support. I don't know if you have any comments on that as well.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the?
Yeah, so the question was sort of, there's general automation tools out there that, different than Y Meadows. Do you have any comments on sort of what makes customer support perhaps slightly different space?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, when you're looking, I kind of said it before, why we were working with you. It's important to find tools that can really meet your business process and your tech stack. That's the most important. I think that when we're talking about automation, especially, a company that can integrate well with your tech stack is critical. Because there would have been no way for me to get my in my my internal engineering team to change the architecture of our database or anything to meet a product. There would have been zero way. They would have said no, right? Like they're doing me a favor by even helping me with this work. So you really have to find a vendor that can be flexible there and that can do all of the things necessary. Like I'm seeing, I'm seeing like someone ask a question. This is more a question for you, Alan, but it is like, if different systems, I guess, the output of their data is different, you need you need a product that can say, yeah, it doesn't matter what the output looks like. We can do that through code, or there are ways our system can handle that. Absolutely.
Good. And maybe we'll do one last question. You touched on it a little bit earlier, but it said, how do reps respond to automation being integrated into their workflows? Are they happy about it? They have concerns? What's been the result now that you've put it in place?
I haven't heard anything negative, but to be honest, we haven't reached out to gauge. I think it's definitely it's helped them. So we use we use your tool to also help us label what our contacts are about and maybe provide, hey, here's a suggested article that you can be reading to help process this. But you also, when your automations run, and let's say there's an edge case, right? We've built in messaging so that you're messaging what happened there, like why the automation couldn't run, but then you're also helping gather a lot of the information about the customer via the API that our agents would have had to do on their own, right? So again, I think those are all positive because you're once again saving time and getting closer to the resolution before a human has even needed to look at that request. So all of that's been incredibly beneficial.
Great. Joe, thank you so much for your time today, or sharing the OpenTable experience and knowledge, and really appreciate it, and look forward to continue to involve you in future webinars in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.